What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It is Friday, August 11th, 2017. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness that's Friday. I don't know about you. It has been a very stressful, exhausting week, and Claire and I both need a little time off here over the weekend and try and get some rest, because next week is probably going to be a lot worse. Okay, we've got lots to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room twiddling the dials, and we did get an update with Leon Siu, who's the foreign minister for the Kingdom of Hawaii, and he has reconfirmed for next Tuesday. In hour number 3, we'll be talking about issues of secession, restoration of sovereignty, and so forth. And, of course, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us today in hour number 3 as well. So, boy, we've got a phone call right at the start. Let's go to Lisa in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, thank you so much. I can't believe I got on here so quickly. First of all, I really appreciate your show. I found you through Richie Allen, probably just about 6 months ago, and I really have garnered a lot of information. I do appreciate it. The nature of my call, I'm wondering if you've ever heard of a voting purging program, I guess is the best way to put this, called Interstate Crosscheck.
Well, it's definitely needed, because we were reporting only yesterday that studies are showing that there were a lot of people who had changed residence over the last couple of years, and they were still registered to vote in 2 states, and many of them did. They'd vote in their home state, and then they'd drive across the border and vote again where they're still registered in their former place of residence. So, yeah, I definitely think some kind of a system...
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I definitely think some kind of a system to make sure that U.S. citizens, first of all, that they are U.S. citizens, and they're registered to vote in only one location in the country. I think that's necessary.
Okay. I was just wondering if I can stay on another minute. If you happen to see the Greg Palast has done quite a bit of investigative journalism over this. He's an old-fashioned detective like we don't have anymore, an old-fashioned journalist.
Yes.
And he did a documentary called The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. And the thing is with that cross-check, I understand what you mean totally, but the thing is they're not, in a lot of the cases, they're just going by first and last name and not Social Security number or middle initial or any of that jazz. So, that could be problematic with purging a lot of people off unnecessarily due to them not using a super legitimate way of matching it up. He got a hold of that Chris Kobox cross-check information or folder or whatever you want to call it quite a while ago before he did the documentary.
Yes.
It was really good. I just kind of wanted to mention that to your viewers to maybe take a look at that documentary.
Well, we definitely need to be looking at all these documentaries, and it sounds to me like what Greg Palast has found is a really good idea that's been poorly implemented or has been implemented in a way to turn it away from its original good purpose and use it as yet another weapon to deregister legitimate voters to swing the election. We know that was a big problem back in Florida in 2000. Where they were doing all these voter roll purges, and instead of actually getting rid of disqualified voters, they were getting rid of basically Democrats, and they were just.
That's right, Mike. I think you put it really in a perfect way. That's probably why you have a show. What you just said, something that might have started off for maybe good purposes has ended up for evil purposes, for lack of a better description. So, yeah, I think, I just sort of wanted to let your viewers know to maybe look into Greg Palast. I write a weekly column, and I always sign off every week with Interstate Crosscheck because, half of the community is convinced that Russia interfered, which is complete baloney. So that's all I have. I appreciate what you do. I love the lovely Lady Claire, and I usually don't tune in until 5 o'clock, so I wanted to get this done.
Well, again, it's an important issue, and I'm somewhat alarmed that Donald Trump's Election Integrity Commission, first of all, they're not getting a lot of press, which we understand because the corporate media is part of the election fraud problem in this country. Second, they're being opposed and blocked by all these states. The problem with all of these election processes, whether it's cross-check or voter roll purges or the running of the elections themselves, they're being operated by people who are themselves partisan, who are put in there by the various political parties in order to be in a position to warp and hijack the election. It is.
Yep, that's right.
There is no actual formal structure for managing the elections in this country. It's just basically up for grabs. And more, there's no transparency, starting with those electronic machines. In many states,
you're right. They're terrible.
In many states, you can actually be thrown in jail for wanting to basically witness and verify the counting of the votes. And again, we saw just how wacko it was in Florida back in 2000. And following that, they were promising, oh, we're going to fix the election system. We're going to make it more honest and transparent. And nothing was done because the people who benefit from the election fraud are in power. And they want to stay in power, and they're not going to change the system that is keeping them in office. And the whole thing ought to really be torn down and replaced with something along the lines of what I describe in my article, How to Have Honest Elections. Again, our current system is designed to facilitate and then help conceal election fraud, and we need to go the other way with something that makes election fraud as difficult as possible to carry out and just immediately apparent when it's tried. But again, like Stalin used to say, as long as the people think there's been an election, that's all we really need, because the people who count the votes are the ones who are really deciding what's going on.
That's right, exactly. I mean, I hope, and, this was kind of my hope in life, I suppose, is that we would go to some sort of paper ballots with maybe citizen overview. Somebody like you or me would be perfect for this because I'm totally nonpartisan. I hate the parties equally, and I know you do as well. So, I mean, people like us should be on these voting commissions or whatever they're called.
Well, again, if you have not already read it, I recommend you go to my website, and then up at the top, underneath my smiling face, there's a little gray box full of permanent links to articles, and the very first one in the upper left is How to Have Honest Elections, and if you haven't read it, you need to check that out. Because ever since I wrote that, I've gotten a lot of emails from people in other countries saying, yeah, after we got rid of the electronic machines, we adopted a system that's kind of what you're describing here. And I think you'll agree, it's not going to be perfect. There's always going to be somebody out there trying to figure out a way to get around the rules and steal the election. But it's set up to really make it almost impossible to get away with. So, Lisa, thanks an awful lot.
Great.
All right, we're going to let
you... Thank you, Mike, and I'll read the article.
All right, Lisa, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. Obviously, the big story right now is just this head-butting, chest-thumping, wagging of genitalia between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, and it is rapidly spinning out of control. And everybody's out there saying, bomb North Korea, bomb North Korea. Corporate media is claiming that the majority of Americans are in favor of starting yet another war in North Korea. They must be polling the criminally insane. Or it's just another fabrication, like all those polls last year that said, oh, yes, Hillary has a 95% chance of winning the White House. So we know they lie about these polls. And the interesting thing is, if you ask most people, where's North Korea, they're not going to be able to find it quickly. They're going to have to go hunting around Google Earth or use a search engine. They're not really sure where it is. So they're going to be looking at that. And I'm not even sure Donald Trump really knows where it is. But he's just out there already talking about we're going to nuke, we're going to nuke, we're going to nuke. Now, I want to take a step back here and remind everybody of something that came out yesterday. When the news started trumpeting that North Korea says they're going to attack Guam, the first thing that popped into my head is that makes no sense at all. If North Korea was going to attack Guam, they wouldn't announce it ahead of time. Because announcing it ahead of time does two things. It gives the U.S. military time to reinforce the defenses around the island, meaning the attack will fail. And second, it invites a preemptive strike, which everybody's talking about right now. Then what we find out from North Korea's English language media is that what North Korea actually announced is they're going to have another test of a long-range missile. And because of the concern raised with the passenger airline for the last one, North Korea is announcing we're going to plunk these test missiles down in the ocean, down by Guam, about 40 kilometers off their shore. That's where they're coming down. Adjust your naval and aviation traffic accordingly, which, by the way, is standard procedure. Anytime somebody's going to carry out a test, they'll issue a notice to mariners, notice to aviators, NOTAMs, and they'll activate what are called defined military warning zones. The United States did that when they were testing out the Aegis CEC system off of Long Island. They still accidentally shot down TWA 800, but you get the idea of how it's supposed to work. And that's why North Korea announced it ahead of time. They're announcing a test, not an attack. But the corporate media, in their usual style, is out there saying, oh, they're coming to attack, they're coming to attack, they're going to blow up Guam, they're going to blow up Hawaii. But everybody stay calm. There's nothing to worry about. Keep on going to your job, keep on paying your taxes, let's not make the tourists nervous. But North Korea is coming to destroy us in a hailstorm of nuclear fire. But everyone stay calm. So you can see where this is all kind of going. China has done a complete about-face on North Korea. It looked initially like they were going to go along with all of this nonsense. They were going to support the sanctions against North Korea and hope that everything was going to calm down. Well, now they have turned around, and they are definitely on the side of North Korea. They're still saying everybody should calm down and go back to the negotiating table. But an editorial in the state-run Global Times in China has stated flat out, if the U.S. strikes North Korea, China will side with North Korea and try and prevent any attack. So the U.S. government is now in the position they got to make it look like Korea fired the first shot, which is why we're very nervous here in Hawaii and on Guam that they may pop off a nuclear bomb here and say, ooh, look what North Korea just did. Because there's a long history of countries doing that sort of thing. Think Gleiwitz in Germany, start of World War II. Let's see. Again, another issue statement from China. China will prevent a U.S. first strike against the North Korean regime. It doesn't get more real than that. Interesting little article coming out of UN Report today, or UN reported today, calling it the best of the bad options. The United States has a plan to strike North Korea's nuclear sites with the B-1 Lancer bombers. And they're ready to go if Donald Trump will order it. Now, there is a problem. By now, Kim Jong-un has dispersed whatever nuclear weapons he actually has. Those known nuclear sites are probably empty. And the bottom line is, if they go in and they bomb these sites, there is absolutely no way they can guarantee that they have disarmed Kim Jong-un. All they've done is really annoy the heck out of him and moved it closer to the point where he will do something. Maybe that's the whole point. Except that, again, China is saying this would be viewed as a first strike, and they're going to move to intervene. And the rest of the world is really getting very nervous about this. Everybody's reacting to Donald Trump's fire and fury, and Trump's already saying, it wasn't strong enough, I need more rhetoric, I need bigger words. And the rest of the world is saying, okay, it really is time to put the ice bucket challenge on all of this. Even Angela Merkel is criticizing Donald Trump for just ramping up this war of words. And she's out there saying an escalation of rhetoric is the wrong answer. And when she was asked if if Germany would stand by the U.S. in a war against Korea, Merkel dodged the question. So it's just like with all these sanctions. Europe is just pulling away from the U.S. and saying, this has gone on far enough. It's nonsense. We're not going to get involved. Leave us out of it. Interesting analysis coming out of Yahoo in their finance section saying that Kim Jong-un doesn't need to attack Guam. He's already won the war of propaganda. Now, first of all, North Korea is talking about a test, not an attack on Guam itself. But Yahoo is correct on the rest of it. Kim Jong-un has won the propaganda war. He's a little tiny country. He's David standing up to Goliath. And while I'm on that list of people who wishes he would shut his yap, he's gained a tremendous amount of stature for himself and for North Korea by standing up to the American bully. And right now, he has dealt a huge blow to U.S. credibility. But everyone is seeing the situation is spiraling out of control. Ron Paul is out there saying, I fear our government more than North Korea. Now, Trump came out with one comment, which I agree with, although the context is a little weird. He's out there saying that nuclear weapons are more dangerous than global warming. Yeah, obviously. Getting to our domestic politics, you know, the kind of stuff the corporate media wishes you wouldn't pay attention to. A lot of people are still talking about this group of former intelligence professionals. And they organized this group back in 2003. And for most of its existence, they've been viewed very positively by the corporate media. Not so anymore, because the group, the Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, have been looking at this idea that Russia hacked the DNC emails. And the evidence is clearly it was an internal leak. And so now that these veteran intelligence professionals have come on out stating what everybody already knows to be obvious, the corporate media is out there saying, oh my goodness, how could they be so stupid? These are supposed to be spies. They're supposed to know what's going on. But there really is a battle going on between the truth and the liars are just absolutely desperate right now. If at first you don't succeed, lie again. And they're still trying to push that forward. And they're not gaining any traction with it. Now then, I want to talk about something that happened a little while ago where there was this federal prosecutor down in Debbie Wasserman Schultz district, a guy named Weisnant, who was found on the beach. And the police have finally come on out and said, oh, yes, there's no question, it was a suicide. The only problem is the police searched for 2 blocks around the crime scene and could not find the gun. Now, Weisnant had been assigned to the Miami office of the U.S. Attorney's Office and been hired as a federal prosecutor only a few months earlier and was investigating visa fraud in Debbie Wasserman Schultz district. A lot of wet work going on right now. Now, Donald Trump, when he's not screaming about North Korea, he is screaming about Mitch McConnell, who was out there about repeal and replace Obamacare. For 7 years he's been on this campaign, couldn't get it done. And it does look like Mitch kind of threw the race a little bit, but on the other hand, you had people like John McCain, who only a year before was excoriating the Democrats about the failure of Obamacare, and when it came up for a repeal vote, McCain just voted against it. That was the deciding vote. If he'd voted for the repeal, we would all be free to look for the best deals in insurance policies. But we can't have competition. That threatens corporate profits. We can't allow that goes against what fascism is supposed to be about, where you order the people to buy the most expensive, poorest quality product. So that's where they are. Anyway, we got to take a break for commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And speaking of Obamacare, right now on Fox News, they've got a story. Apparently, protesters are outside the home of a Minnesota Republican congressman. People are very angry over Obamacare. It was a raw deal. We've been scammed. We know we've been scammed. Congress knows we've been scammed. Congress knows we know that they know we've been scammed, and they won't do anything about it. Because it's making money. It's making money. And things that make money are good. And things that don't make money are bad. That's fascism right there for you. Anthony Weiner is still out of jail. He doesn't go in to be sentenced for his sexting a minor until next month. So he's basically still living at home. But he's finding he is being shunned by a lot of people in his neighborhood who were Hillary Clinton supporters. And they're not shunning him because he was sending pictures of his junk to an underage girl. They're actually blaming him, in part, for Hillary's loss, and they don't want to have anything to do with him. Yeah, it didn't help. Anthony Weiner's behavior didn't help. Huma Abedin's behavior didn't help. Podesta's behavior didn't help. But in the end, Hillary Clinton lost that election despite overwhelming election fraud in her favor, because we, the American people, just cannot stand her anymore. And we cannot comprehend why she has not been in prison for years for what she and her husband and the Bushes have been up to. And now, of course, they're going through this dog and pony show where, oh, yes, we're investigating the email server, and we're going to have Hillary sign a document that says, yes, she was careless. And then they're going to drop the rest of the investigations. And the only reason they're doing that, of course, is because everybody's saying, look, you're spending all this time and money on this Russia-Trump election issue. There's no evidence there. Here you've got Hillary Clinton, where the former head of the FBI went down a list of felony Title 18 violations she committed. Why is she not being prosecuted? And so the whole point of this thing about the plea deal is they're going to give her a wrist slap. And then they're going to shut down all the other investigations and say, see, we investigated, and she has paid a horrible price. She had to sign a document. Now let's go back to Trump and Russia. It's a limited hangout. It's a classic limited hangout operation. Now, Michael Moore, hard to get a read on the guy. I mean, I like a lot of his work. I think a lot of his work is liberal nonsense. I mean, I did like Roger and Me. He was right on point with that. I loved the one about the next land to be invaded. The one about the health care. I love Canadian Bacon. Got that one on DVD. But Michael Moore has decided that he is been bitten by the stage bug, and he has written himself a one-man play starring himself. And the play is called The Terms of My Surrender, and it's described as a 12-step meeting for the Democratic Party. And the play opened at New York City's Belasco Theater yesterday, and the reviews were near unanimous. It is a stinker. Probably as big a flop as Al Gore's inconvenient sequel. Hillary is already starting to thrash around trying to find some kind of a base she can build for another run at the White House. And by the way, that's the whole deal about this plea bargain. She's going to plead guilty to a misdemeanor, which means she's still going to be able to run for the White House. And she's already talking about 2020. So now she's getting religion, and she's going out and talking about how her faith made her strong. She's trying to play across the aisle to the religious right here. And Hillary Clinton's pastoral advisor has come on out comparing her election loss to Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, saying that last November was Hillary's crucifixion, but be patient, Sunday is coming. I got to stop reading these things because I'm ruining so many monitors and keyboards when I throw up at this kind of stuff. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I was watching on Fox News, and Senator John Toole is out there wagging his finger at President Trump saying, well, you know, criticizing Mitch McConnell on Twitter isn't helpful. All right, fair enough. Senator, what is helpful? That's the big question. because you've been talking about repealing Obamacare. Trump campaigned on repealing Obamacare. The American people want Obamacare repealed. You tell us what is helpful, what is going to get you to basically go along with the will of the people, which is what your job is supposed to be. Okay, criticizing you isn't helping. Now we're having protests outside your home. If that's not helping, what are we talking about here? Is it time for tar and feathers? We're willing to go there. But you tell us, what is going to get you, the Senate, to stop catering to the special interest and the health insurance corporations and do what we, the people, require of you? Because I think we're all getting sick and tired of you standing up there and acting like you're the aggrieved party saying, how dare you criticize us for not doing what the American people want? We're protected by the First Amendment. We're allowed to criticize you all we want. And that applies to President Trump as well. So don't change the topic. The problem isn't Donald Trump's twittering. It's the fact that the Senate, for that matter the House, are not doing their job. Now then, moving on here. Back to Debbie Wasserman Schultz. This Awan brothers scandal is basically spelling the end of her political career. And the scandal, of course, is that she kept Imran Awan on her payroll long after all three of them were accused of stealing computer equipment and sensitive information from Capitol Hill. And they should have been arrested and investigated, but somebody blocked that. In any event, Imran was arrested last month after attempting to flee the U.S. And so Debbie Wasserman Schultz, forget about what she did as head of the DNC, forget about the DNC emails and the rest of it. She's now seen as damaged goods. And Florida Democrats wish she would just go away. It wasn't all that long ago. They were saying exactly the same thing about Hillary Clinton after that shameful, spoiled brat reaction to her election loss. And they would say, we wish she'd just go away. She's damaging the brand. And here we have Debbie Wasserman Schultz doing exactly the same thing. All right, let's talk about the wars a little bit. We've been talking for a while about how we've been in Afghanistan for 16 years. But if you skip over some of these momentary breaks, the United States has been at war in Iraq for 27 years. Following that moment where Iraq was literally goaded into invading Kuwait. Now the story behind that, another classic setup of war. The goal was to go into Iraq. Now, there was an oil company on the Iraq side of the Kuwait border. I think it was an American one. I forget which one it was. But they were slant drilling under the border into Kuwait's oil reserves. That's a big, tacky no-no. But unfortunately, it does happen. That was why Kuwait was causing all kinds of trouble and complaint. And Iraq wanted to slap them down. And the U.S. envoy to Iraq basically conveyed a message that if Iraq went into Kuwait, we wouldn't do anything about it, and set Saddam Hussein up. Because, yeah, you went into Kuwait, and the U.S. launched a war, Desert Storm. And the first time they stopped before they got to Baghdad, then they pulled on back. Everybody said that was a mistake. Then they went in again. And along the way, oil wells were being set on fire, and Scud missiles were flying, and Patriot missiles were flying, and it was a huge mess. But we've never really gotten out of there. We still have U.S. forces in Iraq. They're still having to hide behind the little walls. 27 years. All those lives, all that money. 27 years. Now, over in Europe, Brussels is still talking about creating a grand army of the European Union, answerable to nobody but Brussels. And basically, Juncker is getting out there with dreams of grandeur, that the United Europe will be a projector of power and influence. And apparently Putin's reaction to that is kind of like laughter. Because he's looking at the European Union. They're in chaos with all this refugee nonsense. They're bankrupt because of the predations of their private. Juncker himself is not a strong leader. Any army put forward by the European Union is going to be just as messed up as the EU itself. And by the way, that's true of any army. Any army put forward is only going to be as good as the nation and the government behind it. Efficient, well thought out, logical governments and nations produce very capable military. Governments in chaos and turmoil, nations that are economically distressed, they're not going to produce effective fighting forces. Good example, apparently they've had to ground the Ospreys again here in the United States. Now, as you know, everybody's into walls all of a sudden. Trump wants a wall, and the Europeans want a wall, and the rest of it. And Ukraine built a security wall to guard themselves from Russian aggression. And it looks like the wall is being sabotaged. Oh, it's proof the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. Actually, no, what it is they built this wall across the feeding paths of the wild boars. And wild boars are a very different mindset than the very tame domesticated pigs you will find at your farm. Wild boars are to be reckoned with. We have them here on the island. And what they're doing is they're literally digging underneath, and in some cases through, the security wall. Always got to take those critters into account for that. Probably would have been wise to have a little trench or something on that. I have to wonder what's going on with the president here. As you know, there's been this escalating war. It began under Obama when the U.S. government seized 2 diplomatic properties belonging to Russia and kicked out a bunch of diplomats. Russia finally responded a little while ago, seizing 2 U.S. Diplomatic facilities in Russia and kicking out 755 diplomats. Trump finally came up with a response today. Hey, Vladimir Putin, thank you. We're going to save a lot of money. Ha, 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 ha. See how clever I am. And by the way, that's the response on the corporate media. Well, that's telling Putin, there's your one-upmanship. No, it isn't. Actually, that was the shark. Sharks down there in the water going, oh my goodness, there's the president. Down in Venezuela, as you know, and again, preface this with the head of the CIA is admitting this is a regime change operation. And apparently a report in an Arabic newspaper this week cites unnamed sources as beginning a push to replace Maduro with Tarek el-Aissami. Now, he's currently the vice president of Venezuela. He's also a drug lord. He's a drug kingpin. See, once again, the illegal drug trade comes into the middle of U.S. foreign policy. You just think about that. Next time you see a druggie on the streets or somebody dead of an overdose, gee, I wonder where all the illegal drugs are coming from. They're coming from the U.S. government itself. Let's talk about the economy right now. We've been commenting for a while about up in Canada how the housing prices keep going up and going up. The same thing's happening here in the U.S., especially in California, even though demand just doesn't seem to be there. The millennials are living with their parents into their 30s while they struggle to pay off those college loans. And it was inevitable somebody would say, is this a bubble? Yeah. Smells kind of like 2007. And sure enough, home sales in Canada have seen a 40% drop. The bubble is getting ready to burst. Now, over in Montgomery County, at least as reported by Investment Watch blog, there's another one of these articles out there saying, oh, we can't raise the minimum wage. It'll cost jobs. We'll lose money. It'll be the end of our economy. It's all propaganda by the business owners who want to maximize their profits. And they're so busy looking in their own wallets, they're missing a critical reality of any economy. Before those people will come into your place of business and buy your products, there has to be some mechanism for getting money into their pockets. And I'm sure all these business owners are saying, well, let all the other companies raise their minimum wage. Why should I have to do that? But raising the minimum wage is not going to destroy the economy. Leaving it where it is destroying the economy, at least the consumer economy. And again, look at the amazing prices on cars on those commercials. Look at the retail Mageddon, the restaurant Mageddon. They're all going out of business because people simply do not have the money. I keep going back to that horrible story about this girl in Silicon Valley who has a job. She's working for Facebook. And she's still living out of her car with 2 kids because the rents are too high. The payments on her student loans are too high. She went to college. And she can't find a place to live that she can afford. Now, when you have a woman with kids who has a job, who's college educated, and is still having to live out of a car, you can't look at that and say that we have a functional economy in this country. You can't. We have 8,000 homeless people on this island. And the only thing the state can think to do about it is to just make sure they're shoved off where the tourists aren't going to see them. That's it. You can't look at that and say we have a functioning economy. You can't go down to the local shopping mall and look at all the retail vacancies and say we have a functioning economy. It's just not there. By the way, down at our local mall, August, the Christmas stuff is already going up. And yes, it's with the Halloween and the Thanksgiving, any reason to get the money out of your pocket. Article coming out of, it's another one from Investment Watch blog, asking if the Federal Reserve is lying about having 6,000 tons of gold stored in a basement in Manhattan. And nobody knows. The Federal Reserve will not let anybody in. Remember what happened when Germany asked to repatriate their gold? The Federal Reserve said, oh, no, we can't. We can't. We're not set up for it. It'll be years. And Germany came out and said, can we at least look at our gold stored in your basement? And the Federal Reserve said, oh, no, we're not set up for that either. Just take our word for it. It was a big stink. And for a while, it looked like it was going to get ugly until Germany's private central bank stepped in and literally said, look, we trust them. You German people, the German government, just calm down. We are absolutely convinced the New York Federal Reserve has your gold. Now, the New York Fed has started sending gold back to Germany, but it's not the original stamped numbered bars that were put there for deposit. And in point of fact, it's not even as pure. Now, the way the gold depositories work, it's not like you put some gold in and you get different gold out. It's like a safety deposit box. Germany should get out the exact same physical bars that she put in, and that has not happened. So and again, we covered this on History Channel's America's Book of Secrets, The Gold Conspiracy. And by the way, that's apparently rerunning right now. I'm getting emails about that. Yeah, it's all a fraud. I mean, look at the criminality we're seeing in the banks and Wall Street. It's nonstop. Yeah, they're playing fast and loose with other people's gold. All right, let's take a phone call. George in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank God it's Friday, Mike. Thank God it's Friday.
Thank goodness it's Friday. Yes, absolutely.
Well, you know the things about these high rents. You know why these rents are getting high? Because these local politicians keep jacking up the property tax.
Yes.
Well, right now the Texas legislature is in a special sessions, and one of the things about property taxes, and my state representative bragging about the beautiful plan they have to sort of curb property taxes. So I started reading the comments down below, all the comments that the state representatives, and then look at the other state representatives. You know what they're all saying? Abolish the property tax. I say that's one more tool the politicians politicians can't use against us. We shouldn't be having property taxes, Mike.
Well, let me play devil's advocate. The original point of property taxes was to pay for the police, fire, ambulance service for the community. Unfortunately, you're right. As with all good things, it was hijacked to a nefarious purpose, and they started raising property tax as another means to obtain money to cover government borrowing and other things. Here in Hawaii, there's a big ongoing debate regarding our light rail system, which is now billions of dollars over budget, years behind schedule, and they're talking about a major increase in property taxes to cover the loss on this. And a lot of people are very angry and upset because most of the people here in Hawaii didn't want the light rail system anyway. It's really set up to support primarily getting tourists from the Honolulu area out to where the new Disney resort is, Electric Bay, that whole area, and actually has very few stops along its route on the bottom of the island. And all of those stops are, of course, at shopping malls. All right, George, stay on the line. We've got to take a break. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with George in Texas. And just to kind of wrap up what I was saying, we've got this light rail system, billions, cost overrun, years behind schedule. A lot of people questioning its real utility, whether it'll ever pencil out, whether enough people are ever actually going to ride this thing to where it's not going to require constant subsidies. And they're talking a major increase in property taxes for the state to pay for this. And, of course, that's making the people on the other islands very angry because they're never going to ride this thing, and yet they're going to wind up paying the cost of it. So, so far, the city council has, the legislature has voted this down. But at some point, somebody somewhere is going to have to cover this this disaster, or they're going to have to abandon it. And it wouldn't be the first time one of these major projects was abandoned prematurely. They abandoned the super ferry. At least they had a working ferry out of that one. If you go down to Honolulu Harbor, right across from, Aloha Tower, you'll see the remains of train tracks that have, they took them out, and the pillars are still there. Could see the same thing happening here. Anything else, George?
Well, you know, the thing is, I think government should be making sacrifices, not us. I mean,
I agree. That's the big problem. Government never feels they have to cut back on their spending.
I'm talking delay their office annual office renovation, that new office desks they get every year, you know, stuff like that. And boy, cut that. I mean, instead of getting a new fleet vehicle every year, why don't you hold on to it for another 5 years? You know, that really, you know, Mike, you know, I don't think you put out an advertisement saying, give me money because I need a new computer desk, or maybe a new computer I wouldn't mind chipping in for, but, you know, the government never sacrifices.
No, they never do. They never do. And huge amounts of waste. You know, when we were still part of the Hawaii's Computer for Kids program, most of the used computers that we got were being, cycled out of government offices, and they were like only a year old. Unfortunately, the government stopped doing that, and now they sell them as used. I mean, huge amounts of waste. We've all seen massive government waste, no matter where you live. They feel like they're entitled to this exalted life of always a new everything, And you're right about the cars, and you're right about the rest of it. And like I said, we got 8,000 homeless, hungry people on this island, and nobody's doing anything about it except making sure the tourists don't see it.
Well, you know, the thing is, now you know why, like, everybody complained, like, early founding fathers, they said, only landowners can vote. And, well, mostly everybody was landowners, because the reason why they wanted only the landowners to vote, because they had the stake in everything. Because now you got a lot of people don't have a stake in nothing. They're imposing property taxes, higher taxes on the producers, the people who actually own property. Now I know why the founders said landowners should only be allowed to vote.
Well, that was actually more about preserving voting to the people who were really part of the country, because they knew even back then they were going to open the borders to immigration, and it was a way of saying that immigrants do not have a right to vote until they become citizens. Anyway, George, going to let you go. Got to take a break for station identification. Got another caller waiting on the other side of these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and the lines are loaded up right now. And we're talking about property taxes. And I got an email that says, another thing they do in states like California where Prop 13 prevents increasing property taxes is they simply invent new taxes that gather the difference and call them things like utility taxes, even though property taxes are supposed to cover those utilities. And the writer then goes on to say, this is why cities are so vindictive against people going off-grid and disconnecting from utilities, because it means the government is losing money. And that's all citizens are apparently good for at this point. Okay, let's go to Don in Iowa. Aloha, welcome to the show. What is on your mind today?
Hello, Mike. Yeah, there's an old saying, they're going to get you one way or another. Now, that guy in Texas, he doesn't have to pay income tax in Texas.
I think Washington State, when we lived in Washington State, there was no state income tax.
Yeah, there's a few states with no state income tax. There's 5 states with no property tax. Oregon, Montana, I'm looking on my computer. Oregon, Montana, Alaska, New Hampshire, and Delaware. See, those like Oregon has high income tax. So that guy in Texas, yeah, he doesn't have to pay. I thought about going down there. Some people retire down there because they have no state income tax, but then the property tax is going to get you unless you just rent.
Well, wait a minute. Renters pay for property tax indirectly because the landlord isn't going to just eat that increase. That's why people are concerned that they're talking about a major property tax increase because of the light rail, because the rents will be driven up by it.
Right. But I guess Alaska is really the best place if you're obsessed with taxes, because they have no property tax or income tax, because they have their money from the
oil companies, yeah, and
Alaska Permanent Fund dividend. In fact, they pay you to live there. But then real estate is expensive.
That's very surprising considering how much room there is up there. But I'm afraid
it's all owned by the federal government. There's hardly any private land in Alaska. That's a problem. National forest.
Again, the enclave clause in the Constitution. The federal government is not allowed to own any land other than what's under federal buildings and federal infrastructure like harbors and airports and designated military bases. Did they designate all of Alaska as a military base?
I remember when that happened. They just basically made it all national forest, just like, most of the West, a lot of it is national forest land too. That's what they did. So you can't buy it. You can go up there and camp out. Some people go in the national forest and have mining claims or something, or they live illegally. But anyway, those are the 5 states. Delaware, no property tax. New Hampshire, no property tax. Alaska, Montana.
Well, every time somebody talks about, is this tax too high, this tax too low, are these people taxed too much, are these people getting away with taxes? And yes, the wealthy skew the system where they're paying less taxes. But the real answer is all the taxes are simply too high. The government is too big. We are, to use the business term, management heavy. Because along with obviously the president and the Congress, we've got all these bureaucracies and all these agencies, and they're all growing and bloating, and they're all protected by federal hiring laws. Yeah, I mean, remember
TSA.
One of the things.
TSA, they could eliminate the whole TSA, and it would be a good thing for. It would be a wonderful thing.
Certainly be great for us here in Hawaii because it has really hammered our tourism.
Anybody that wants to, it used to be fun. I can remember it used to be fun to fly.
You know,
can you remember that?
Claire says exactly the same thing. I used to love to fly. It's just such a pain in the neck right now. But unfortunately, we're on an island in the middle of the ocean. We have to fly to get anywhere. Otherwise, we have to walk, take a step, come up for air, take a step, come up for air. That takes a little while to get out there. But the reality is that we are management heavy, and a lot of these agencies duplicate each other. Look at what's come out about the CIA and the NSA's cyber warfare divisions. They basically duplicated each other's works. You know, at twice the cost, twice the staff. And there are too few Americans left to support this entire structure.
Just a huge morass of BS.
Yeah.
OSHA is an example. OSHA, they got all kinds of rules, and they just enforce. They come up with more rules so they can protect their job by having more rules and enforcing more rules.
Yes.
So, and I live in a small town here, but they have these damn every little backhoe or something, you know, now has to be made with that. You know, that beeper when they're in reverse.
Yes, yes.
Well, I mean, this is a town of less than 100 people live here, you know, and nobody's going to get run over with that guy going in reverse, but he has to make that noise because the federal government says so.
Yeah, and
just one example.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes it's rather ridiculous, but again, a lot of these agencies aren't even really doing the job they're supposed to be doing. The Securities and Exchange Commission. I mean, they just look the other way while Bernie Madoff with the loot was ripping off his own customers and investors. Minerals Management Service was looking the other way while the Deepwater Horizon blowout preventer was being neglected for 4 years. It just goes on and on and on, where these government agencies supported by your tax dollars are in effect working hand in hand with the very corporations they're supposed to be maintaining oversight on. And so it's a huge, huge corrupt system. Anyway, listen, Don, got to let you go. We're going to switch to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I don't know if I know you talked about for a minute before about Trump's statement about saving money on the embassy.
Yes.
But I was, InfoWars brought out the fact that this guy,
Hello?
Philip Mudd.
Okay.
Was the head of the, some kind of an analyst, head of the anti-terrorism unit or something, the CIA, and also managed to weasel his way into the FBI, too, to take over that. This guy actually made a threat after that, and an interesting statement, too, on CNN. He said, first of all, he threatened Trump's life. He said, somebody from the government is going to kill him. Okay, I believe, my own opinion is Donald Trump should have ordered the Secret Service over that CNN right there and then and hauled this clown away in handcuffs. He actually was asked by, I think the guy's name is Tapper, the reporter, and, you know, did he really mean it? And he gave some song and dance. But it sounds to me like he really meant it. I'm going to replay the thing on YouTube later.
All right, well, send
that.
The
other thing is he made an interesting statement. But even more, he also said that the CIA that admitted that a lot of these employees there by the State Department, the embassy, are CIA agents.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
This puts a lot of officers out of work and stuff like that. I can't believe he actually admitted that. And I started wondering about the Ayatollah Khomeini when he took the hostages that time and said they're all a bunch of spies. Evidently, he had a point.
Yeah, I mean that's very common, and it's not just the United States. I mean, it's kind of like this nudge, wink, wink understanding that your diplomatic personnel in your embassy, that many of them are intelligence operatives, and of course that's why they are constrained within a certain distance of the embassy. They're not allowed to just run all over the country, and yeah, when they go on out, they're being watched and followed by the security services of that country to try and keep things down. But it's sort of we won't bother your agents if you don't bother our agents kind of a deal. So
but you actually admit it,
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. What?
I'm sorry. He actually came out and admitted something like this. That's really incredible.
It's not like it wasn't known. It's not like it wasn't known. Anyway, listen, Mark, we're going to let you go, and I got to do some news here. I got to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Getting on back to the economic news here. We have got a statement from Janet Yellen. There will be no new crisis in my lifetime, and that is a red flag warning, because if you go back and you look at the crash of 29 or the crash of 07 or 2008, it was always preceded by somebody in a position, making a statement to the effect, oh, it can't happen with our modern banking system. There's always been a classic case of famous last words just before it all came apart. Now, today, the stock market recovered a little tiny bit from the dump yesterday. So the plunge protection team has massaged the market. So investors have their usual Friday happy ending to relax over the weekend with. But it gets very, very nerve-wracking when somebody like Yellen says, oh, there's never going to be another crisis. Just go on investing. Give your money to the bank and the stock market. We're in good condition here. Just yesterday, I was talking about how much money the U.S. Post Office is losing and said, get ready for a rate increase. And boy, I hate being right all the time, because according to this article out of Russia Today, the U.S. Postal Service is calling for price increases amid their record losses. So, time to buy up those forever stamps, as many as you can, and put them away, because they're about to get a lot more expensive. One company that's not doing well in the stock market is J.C. Penney. Their shares have hit an all-time low. They were attempting a turnaround to basically recover from their little part of Retail-Mageddon, and it has failed. And so J.C. Penney joins that list of iconic American retailers who may not be with us all that much longer. And I'm sure right now all of these retailers like J.C. Penney and Sears and the rest, they're out there trying to secure financing, saying, don't worry, this year's going to be a great Christmas shopping season. We've already started and it's August. And they've been saying that for the last 7-8 years. And it's abysmal. I mean, by the time Christmas gets here, it won't be decorations, it'll be decor, and it's tacky. We do not have money, and no, we are not going to go back to those plastic cards. Because living on debt is what has ruined so many people and the country itself. Apparently everybody's going on with, Trump made a comment about locked and loaded, and everybody's saying, what do you mean? What do you mean? Well, we all know what locked and loaded means. It means he's ready to pull the trigger. And that, of course, according to China, will get us into conflict with China. Death to the yuan. See, this is going to work out well after all. Now, the other day, we were talking about how many refugees here in the United States who are now worried about being deported under Trump's new immigration policy are going across the border into Canada. And Canada had converted a sports stadium into temporary housing. And then yesterday they were reporting on how the Canadian Army is building a shelter camp. But apparently so many refugees are going across the border into Canada. Canada is now sending soldiers to their own border to stop the migrants. Maybe they could arrange to get a build one wall, get a second wall free deal, so that there'll be one along Mexico and one along Canada. Or you could just sort of bait all the grizzly bears to be along that border. Now, apparently, there are roughly 235,000 refugees and migrants stranded on Libyan shores who are desperate to continue on to Italy by sea. And the United Nations envoy to Libya is basically warning of an imminent new influx to Europe. Italy, of course, does not want 235,000 more refugees. They don't know what to do with the ones they've got. But apparently UN envoy to Libya Martin Kobler said in an interview with the Italian newspaper La Stampa, they're just waiting for an opportunity to depart for Italy, and they're going to do it. It's amazing. Apparently, there was a little bit of a surprise. A lot of migrants are now entering Europe through Spain. And apparently, there was a video on one of the Spanish beaches, people just out there having fun, swimming, sunbathing. And all of a sudden, this boat full of migrants just comes on up. And they described it as the migrants storming the beach. So that's the new vector into Europe here. This is a little bit sick, I think. Political correctness run amok. Apparently, and this is over in RINF.com, a lot of sex abuse committed by refugees, it turns out it's not even being reported, because women and children who are being abused, when they try and say, hey, I was abused by this person, immediately all the other migrants and refugees scream, you're being a racist, you're being a racist, you're being a racist. And it's reached the point where a lot of people are just putting up with the abuse. And they're afraid of being called racist, and they're being shunned into silence. It's like what Israel tries to do when they scream anti-Semite. Somebody may be saying the truth about what's going on between Israel and Palestine, or Israel and Syria, and Israel and Gaza, and Israel just says, oh, you're an anti-Semite. And the chorus of voices comes on in, oh, you're an anti-Semite. And the new one, of course, is racist. It's getting overused. You talk about anybody doing anything, and oh, you're just saying that because you're a racist. It's amazing. All right, a little bit of disturbing news, and this is from the category of, I did tell you this was going to happen. Former President Obama and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton are already working on plans to campaign for Democrats in 2018. Huzzah, 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 huzzah. They're good campaigners who want to go on out there. The problem is the Democrats aren't very happy about it, because right now the party is leaderless, and it's looking for a direction they can go in that will build support. And Democratic candidates, congressmen, mayors, governors, they're worried that Obama and Clinton are going to try and basically hijack the Democratic Party and change its direction, probably even further along this whole liberal New World Order, open borders, political correct nonsense, which helped so many of them lose last election. And it's amazing. Debbie Wasserman Schultz has one scandal, and she's out of politics. Hillary Clinton has scandal after scandal after scandal after scandal, and she's still going wrong. Like the ever-ready rabbit, just boom, 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 walking around. Okay, let's talk about some computer independent media issues. interestingly enough, we're starting to see this major and quite open and visible move by the major social media to impose censorship on the independent media. And is everything okay? Okay. So there's this article here where Google is becoming the engine of censorship. And they're out there now saying openly they're going to protect their users from fake news. And Google is now admitting that the established mainstream sources will be given priority and the low-quality information will be relegated to the bottom of the search results. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And an interesting development regarding North Korea. Apparently, Susan Rice is out there with a very relaxed, casual attitude saying the U.S. can tolerate nuclear weapons in North Korea. And yeah, as long as we're not planning to invade them, North Korea is not going to have a reason to use them. So I'm very surprised and gratified that Susan Rice is starting to act like the voice of reason here. So we're talking about computers, we're talking about social media censorship, where Google is basically openly admitting that when you search a topic, that you will get the corporate media first, and then everything else way down on the search list, which could be 5, 6, 7, 8 pages in. Now, there's a little trick that you can do, and that is you can put in a search topic, and then you type SITE : followed by one of your favorite independent media outlets, such as whatreallyhappened.com. And you will get a list of pointers to these articles from that web page that will get you to the independent media view on a story. That's the workaround on that one. Meanwhile, over at YouTube, they are just doing a sweeping crackdown on independent media. Anybody who is not towing the U.S. government line, anybody who's pro-Trump, anybody who's pro-Palestinian, they're just pulling the plug on monetization. Now, in my case, it doesn't affect us because YouTube has never allowed Claire's music videos to be monetized. And if you've seen her music videos, there really isn't anything all that controversial or offensive about them. It's just another way for the deep state to say, booga, 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 booga. We don't like you. But apparently Paul Joseph Watson over at InfoWars is being hit by this. And he's saying they're cracking down on anybody supporting Donald Trump. They don't want anybody out there to push back when the attempt to push Trump out of the White House starts to happen. Apparently Diamond and Silk were also hit with demonetization. We Are Change apparently is being purged. Free Thought Project spoke to Radowski. And it turns out all of his videos have been demonetized. So, yeah, the war between the corporate media and the independent media is out there in the open now. And that's why we have that little beg on the break that our advertisers are being harassed and threatened. Our servers are being attacked. Mine is under constant attack. They try and jam BAM user. It really is InfoWar. Didn't mean to infringe trademark here. And unfortunately, one of the best browsers everybody has is Firefox, which is pretty good. But apparently Mozilla is now joining George Soros' efforts against fake news. And they are adding so-called fact-checking software to their browser. Now, it's not really fact-checking software. It's checking the content of an article against the established recognized authoritative view, which is not necessarily the same thing. But you need to understand, in the mind of a statist, a fact is what the official view is. Oh, these are the facts. Humans are warming the earth. These are the facts. Russia interfered with the election. That's what they mean by a fact. Has nothing to do with truth. Over on the Android App Store, and boy, am I glad I got Claire off that nightmare phone. But apparently they've been doing a search following a couple of recent scandals, and they have found more than 1,000 apps infected with spyware on the Android App Store. All this money to block independent media, nobody cares about all the scammers going on out there. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take a phone call. Chris from Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, aloha, Michael, and I think your leader song coming back into the program was totally appropriate. You want to be a pirate. I had just got off the telephone with a internet security company that I had purchased about a month ago and just got around to installing. Shall I say the name?
Yeah, sure.
McAfee.
Yeah.
And they were very helpful, ran a lot of scans on the computer, but then they got around to the end after they inspected all the potential dangers in my computer, and they manifested that I had been attempted to be hacked by so-called Chinese hackers.
Mm-hmm.
I quickly told the guy I suspected it was probably CIA hackers masking themselves with IPS addresses from Chinese or Russians or other groups they wanted to frame the blame on and cover up the CIA or other hack squads, FBI or whoever's hacking them, their special hack squads. And then they suggested that I needed to spend $600 for a year or $1,700 for lifetime. And then when I told them I was a senior with limited income, they cut it in half. But they wanted me to send the money fast. And I told them that sounded like an extortion attempt, but that I would try to do something, but under their threats that I could be vulnerable to hacks from China.
Yeah, that's high pressure sales techniques, and unfortunately, more and more companies are using them. Obviously, as you know, John McAfee doesn't own the company anymore. We've seen, throughout the years, these little pop-ups that'll come up. Oh, your machine's been infected. Call us, and we will help you clean up the mess. Or there'll be demo versions of anti-malware products that will do a scan and say, oh, you've got 15 million problems on your thing. Send us the money to activate your license, and they're come on. I'm surprised a company of the size and stature of McAfee is using those tactics. Again, it does feel it's like a high-pressure sales attempt. It doesn't really sound to me like a real careful analysis of what you did. It's always best to have a couple of overlapping systems, and there's a lot of free stuff out there that you can use. In fact, I think Kaspersky just put out a free version. It's obviously the low end of their product spectrum, but it's a free version for students or for people like yourself, seniors on limited income. Spybot Search and Destroy, Malwarebytes, and of course the native security inside whatever operating system that you have as well. But I got to tell you that push from McAfee, it feels like high pressure sales and not much else.
Well, I had observed the same concerns myself. I had that unfortunate experience a couple of nights ago. I had to go out for a little bit. I locked my computer off before I left. I came back in, turned it on, and immediately was assaulted with a message from Microsoft claiming it was urgent. I contacted them right away. I think that was what was called the WannaCry virus that infected over 500,000 or 5 million computers. And so I shut down immediately, turned it back on. No deleterious effects I could find, although that's probably when that script claiming to be from China was put into my computer.
Well,
and I observed that.
Again, this idea of these pop-ups, you got to call Microsoft now because, again, you got to be careful. The number that you're calling, they'll pretend to be Microsoft. It doesn't really go to Microsoft.
Well, that was my suspicion, and I'm not real internet savvy, but I'm pretty sophisticated in smarting out fraud, and that's what I expected it to be. I like I say, I shut it off immediately. But I had actually purchased this McAfee program from a Office Max store about a month ago.
Yes.
And just got around to putting it in. But it was a lost leader. I think it was only like an extra $5 to add it on to get this full protection. But it looked to me like, after the fact, a trap to suck you in and do the bait and switch and try to sell you up to the high-priced product.
Yes. Very much so.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate you letting me chat in today, and be blessed.
Well, thank you very much for that. We're going to let you go here. And, again, we're seeing all this money that's being spent in development to protect the world from fake news, and yet nobody seems to take the problem of scammers, cybercrime, telemarketers very seriously. It's just another excuse to sell you a product that otherwise you wouldn't need. So, anyway, now let's get back on down to human-caused global warming. We're coming up on the top of the hour, and the lovely Lady Claire. And as you know, Al Gore's mockumentary, Inconvenient Sequel, has not done very well at the box office. Despite the rave reviews prior to release, the reviews following real people getting to see this thing have not been good at all. It's about 15th box office, and when you see some of the other things that beat it out, you'll understand how bad that is. It's made about $1 million. They're not even going to recover their original production costs. But they're still out there pushing human-caused global warming. Corporate media is talking about the heat wave that's all over Central Europe. They're not talking about all the European countries that are actually experiencing below normal temperatures. And it's snowing in the Alps right now, this being August here. But somebody did a BBC radio interview with former Chancellor Nigel Lawson, who came on out and said there has not, in fact, been any global warming. In point of fact, temperatures have slightly declined over the past 10 years. And, of course, immediately all the scientists and media people who have been on this global warming thing are out there saying, oh, that's simply not true. How dare you not believe us? But, again, remember back in March of 2000, they were out there saying snowfalls are now a thing of the past. Boy, they certainly blew that call, didn't they? But they're still out there, and whether they think they're going to make money with this thing, or they're still being paid by Al Gore's people to push this, or they're just trying to salvage what's left of their credibility and their reputation, they're still out there making this claim. And apparently in response to the complaints over this Nigel Lawson interview, BBC followed up with a story, U.S. report confirms 2016 as the warmest year on record. And if you can't believe the country that told us all Saddam had nuclear weapons, who can you trust? Now, the reality is that all of this temperature data has been exposed as being rigged. The raw data does not support claims of warming or the warmest year. 1936 is the warmest year on record. But analysts have looked at the data from NASA, NOAA, Hadley Climate Research Unit. It's all adjusted upward. And the excuse given is it's a statistical correction. Oh, what are you correcting for? Well, we know the world is warming. The data isn't showing it. We've got to change the data. It's called Zen science. You draw the curves and then you plot your data points. It's a fraud. And by the way, as of right now, despite the media claims about the broiling summer in Great Britain, utilities are already confirming 3 out of every 10 families in Great Britain have already switched on the heating going into the fall. Now, obviously, here in Hawaii, with the sun overhead, our days are very warm. In fact, it is 89 degrees outside right now. But at night, it is really getting very, very cool, which is great because Claire will snuggle up to me. Scientists are getting ready to start deploying some of these new genetically engineered critters using this CRISPR gene editing technology. Now remember, it wasn't all that long ago that they discovered that using this CRISPR gene editing tool was changing other parts of the genome far away from the target. And supposedly they have come up with these protein wrappers, coatings, whatever, that limit this, but it's still not totally 100% accurate. But they're already out there making these things and releasing them. And apparently scientists have embarked on a project to change the social behavior of ants. I don't know what they think they're going to accomplish. The ants show up and make you a picnic lunch. I'm not sure what the goal here is. But that's what they're trying to do. Now, another story, this coming out of Harvard, where geneticist Dr. George Church has announced that the first organ transplants from pigs to humans could take place in just 2 years, because they're using this gene editing to create these genetically altered pigs so that their internal organs are compatible with the human biochemistry and can be transplanted without rejection. And it sounds like a really good idea, but I am very concerned with the obvious recklessness some of the stuff is being done with. I think we have a right to be concerned. And here's a good example. There is a new FDA-approved hepatitis B vaccine. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. And apparently, now that it's actually being put into use, it's discovered that this vaccine will increase the risk of heart attack in patients who are given this vaccine by 700%, means 7 times. And yet, Facebook, Google, YouTube, and Twitter are still banning any talk that this hepatitis B vaccine might be dangerous. Now, this comes under the category of, have these poor people not suffered enough? Apparently, they're still digging around the Fukushima disaster site, trying to find out where some of that radioactive material went. And they came across an unexploded bomb from World War II. Whoopsie. So now they're going to have to deal with that one. Yesterday, August 10th, was the anniversary of another radioactive disaster at Chiasma Bay. This was a nuclear submarine base in Russia's Far East. And they had an Echo 2 submarine, and apparently they were doing maintenance on it. The hull was open, and a large boat passing by spilled water into the reactor and caused all the fuel rods to basically go critical. It's called a cold water accident. And there was basically a chain reaction and led to an explosion and a massive release of radioactivity. And ultimately, they turned it into a nuclear waste dump. They couldn't clean it up. They couldn't recover from it. And maybe that's what they should be doing with Fukushima, since that's what's going on there. But the government of Japan is already trying to get people to move back into the area. And, rebuild the houses that were destroyed in the tsunami. Start gardening again. Grow rice and just complete disregard for the fact these people are going to be exposed to cancers and leukemias. Well, just the cost of doing business here. Now, more and more stories are coming on out. This one from Unreported Today regarding male infertility. And they're dancing around the issue, but basically they're talking about recent research shows sperm concentration and quality dramatically declined in recent decades. And again, I want to go on back and remind everybody about the Epicyte gene. This was a genetically modified corn, originally funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And this Epicyte gene, when eaten, tricks your body into reacting to sperm as if it's an infection. It generates antibodies to sperm. Now, like so many other GMO crops, this plant was tested in open fields. And we have already seen from other examples, the pollen from these GMO plants can travel amazing distances. That little Monsanto 10-yard safety barrier, it's nonsense. It does not work. The wind carries the pollen, birds carry the pollen, bees carry the pollen. There was a big stink, a lawsuit, in fact, from natural organic wheat farmers in Oregon. We're growing a crop for export to China. They sent it on over there. China tested it and said, no, this has got GMO in it. And when they got done investigating, they found out this cornfield in Oregon had been contaminated by pollen from an unapproved GMO wheat being test grown 3 states away. That's how far this pollen can get. So if this Epicyte gene has gone into the wild, and it probably has, then it's infecting other species of corn. And people who are eating this corn, the men who eat the corn, yeah, their sperm is going to start declining. The women who eat the corn cannot be made pregnant. And when you look at the sudden decline in birth rates in the United States, you see that it is primarily focused on the Hispanic population, who are the highest per capita consumers of corn. Now, if this has happened, we're looking at a potential extinction level event where humans will not be able to reproduce anymore at all. But I'm sure Monsanto already has the Roundup Ready baby ready to sell to the rich people. Go down a little computer list and say, I want blonde hair and green eyes, a girl, high IQ. Just design the child right there. But again, if this Epicyte gene, and by the way, it's now co-owned by Monsanto and one other company, why did the USDA develop it? And is this the reason that all of a sudden researchers are showing male sperm is on the decline? They don't say it in this article. What they do is they say, oh, it's modern living, it's clothing are too tight, it's diet and lack of exercise. Maybe, could be. Can't rule it out. But we ought to be taking a closer look at just where that Epicyte gene has wound up, because it was test grown in open fields. And that means the potential for the pollen to have escaped into the wild is very, very real, and we need to look at that. Okay, we're coming up here on a commercial break, and we'll be right back with the rest of this hour after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Coming up on the top of the hour here. And apparently there is a major outage for Verizon over in Florida right now. It looks like the entire state pretty much has had a major issue there. So, again, third world-to-stand type infrastructure. Now then, getting on back here, a couple of stories as we go to the top of the hour, and the lovely lady Claire. Apparently, the Netherlands have been testing a new controversial fishing technique, which is banned by the European Union in general, but can be used on an experimental basis. And apparently what they do is they drop a couple of wires into the ocean, spread wide apart, and they send a huge electric pulse between the wires, and basically it electrocutes the fish. And environmentalists are out there saying that, this is horrible, the fish are suffering, and so forth and so on. But fishermen using the technique are saying the new techniques are less damaging to the environment, especially the bottom corals, than traditional beam trawling. And you want to think about it. If the electrocution kills the fish instantly, how is that more cruel than having them dangling on a hook line for 24 hours, or being hauled up in a net and literally suffocating to death on the deck of the ship? So I think in this case, this is probably a technology that should continue to be used. Of course, it's indiscriminate. You're going to be killing a lot of fish that have no commercial value. But the debate on that will rage on as well. Now, This is a very bizarre story, and it gets back to this whole issue of clergy sexual predators. And apparently this was being reported over in Oraz.com. There was this 12-year-old boy who was a victim of rape at this Christian school, and he was told by the headmaster to turn the other cheek. Little innuendo there, for those of you who are not paying attention. And then went on to say, everything in God's kingdom happens for a reason. And the school is being accused of, no surprise here, covering up repeated sexual assaults against the boy, downplaying the attacks, and refusing to report a rape to the authorities. And the lawsuit is seeking roughly $30 million in damages. Now, obviously, the issue is complex, where these clergy know there is a problem. And they are covering it up, and they're just not dealing with it. And these children are being damaged. There was a documentary that came out a while back on HBO. One thing I like about HBO is they do great documentaries. And I'm hooked on Game of Thrones and waiting for Westworld to come back. But the documentary was Max Mea Culpa, Silence in the House of the Lord, about children in a Christian deaf school being abused. Got to take a station break. We'll be right back with the lovely Lady Claire. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on BAM User, the gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire, who's here every Friday on the 3rd hour to give me a little bit of a chance to kick back and take a deep breath. And so you have some breaking news for us, I understand.
Yes, I do. Apparently, and this comes to us from Zero Hedge, which is generally a pretty straight player, North Korea has issued emergency standby orders to civil defense units. And it appears that North Korean authorities have dispatched these emergency orders to the leaders of ruling Workers' Party committees and civil defense units. And Friday's RFA report quotes a source in Pyongyang saying that the Central Military Commission of the party delivered the orders via email. Now, I don't know exactly to what this may pertain, however.
Well, basically what it is North Korea thinks the U.S. is coming to bomb them.
And 38 North, we have a companion piece. High levels of activity are being seen at North Korea's Sinpo South shipyard. Now, 38 North is an organization that is sponsored by a major university, I believe Johns Hopkins, and all they do is analyze satellite photos. And it indicates from this particular article by Joseph Bermudez, recent commercial satellite imagery reveals several developments suggesting that North Korea may be accelerating the development of the sea-based leg of its nuclear forces. Of particular interest is the imagery is that netting or tarps have been suspended above both the fore and aft deck of the Sinpo-class submarine, obscuring any activity taking place underneath them. And this may suggest that the North is preparing for a new series of at-sea test launches, having undertaken modifications or upgrades to the submarine's launch system, and is developing a more advanced version of the Puktoksong-1 missile.
Okay, well, there's a problem with that because the North Korean ballistic missile submarine, it's a very small sub.
Okay.
And the missile launch tubes are actually in the sail. There's thought to be 1, possibly 2.
Okay.
So we don't know what North Korea might be doing with the bow and stern sections. They may be changing the screw on the sub to go from a high-speed noisy screw to a low-speed quiet screw. They may be making modifications to torpedo tubes. But the missile launch tubes are in the sail, and if that is still open to the sky, then they're not making a change to that.
Okay. All right. Well, I thought that those two articles sort of dovetailed.
Well,
perhaps.
maybe not. I think the one about where North Korea is sending out civil defense, that one makes sense with all the belligerent talk that we're getting here. In fact, apparently Trump is out here again with yet another statement about those bad old North Koreans. And so, obviously, North Korea has grounds to expect an imminent U.S. attack.
Yeah, I would like to hope that that was not the case, but I am afraid that you're absolutely correct on your assessment. And this kind of dovetails into another story that I have for our readers and listeners. Apparently, the U.S.-South Korea drills to go ahead despite the tension with the North. Joint U.S. and South Korean military drills will go ahead as planned later this month, in spite of a spike in tensions in the region. And Donald Trump, as you just mentioned, continues to threaten the use of force to make North Korea curb its missile program. The Outage Freedom Guardian exercises are held annually and cause a lot of, well, let's say, agitas for North Korea, with Pyongyang calling them preparations for war.
I mean, let's face it, if North Korea were holding war games around this island, we would be like screaming bloody murder here.
Yeah. And the 2017 war games were planned before the outbreak of the current crisis and won't be rescheduled, said military officials in the Korean capital, South Korean capital, Seoul. The drills are to take place between 21 and 31 August and will begin without delay. 21 August is not that far away, guys.
No, it isn't. Nope. It's 10 days.
And on Thursday last, the U.S. military launched another exercise in the region, teaming up with its Japanese counterparts. And the thought I have on this, and I know, Mike, you and I sort of agree to disagree on this, but my thought is that timing of multinational military drills is never accidental. You've got the U.S. South Korean drills running between the 21st and the 31st of this month. You've got the ongoing drills with Japan on 28 August. And if the U.S. government might be intent on creating a false flag, I would tend to suspect that the most likely time would be from 21 August through 28 August, when you have the maximum U.S., South Korean, Japanese military participation in these drills, presenting potentially a target-rich environment with which to create that false flag, to be blamed on North Korea as the justification for war against it.
Well, first of all, borrow this for a second. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining the network. You need to remember, they've actually tried this once before with the Chiasma.
And failed.
Well, they failed because when they dragged up the torpedo that they claimed North Korea had used against the South Korean ship, and then they showed the blueprint of the North Korean torpedo, it was very obvious they were not the same weapons. And maybe they're going to be a little bit more careful about the evidence this time.
Yeah.
But I tend to think that in order to get popular support for yet another war, that a false flag is more than likely to be directed against a non-combatant target, either Guam, possibly here in Hawaii, possibly a nuclear weapon launched out of the atmosphere to create an impulse to disrupt communications and electronics and say, oh, those evil North Koreans. But again, I think the world is already cooling on this. Angela Merkel is telling Trump to just basically cool it. Susan Rice is out there saying it doesn't matter if North Korea has nuclear weapons. And it's one of the few times I've agreed with her.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely true. North Korea can have nuclear weapons. They'll never use one against the United States because we'll turn North Korea into a giant pool of molten green glass.
Absolutely. And there was another article from Zero Hedge that really had me thinking. I didn't realize the numbers were quite so high. The U.S. military presence overseas is mushrooming, here, there, and everywhere. And about 200,000 of our troops are stationed in 177 countries throughout the world. That's a lot of foreign bases,
That
Mike.
is a lot of foreign bases.
The forces use several hundred bases, more than 1,000 if the figure includes overseas warehouse and installation. And apparently the U.S. may need more soon with its presence and involvement in armed conflicts on the rise.
Basically, they're repeating the Roman model. They're going to garrison the world and have our legions, within to remind all those countries who the boss really is.
Yeah, and under President Trump, apparently drone strikes worldwide have grown 432% as of mid-March. The civilian death toll is significant in Iraq and Syria as the result of U.S. bombardment. A war with Iran appears to be imminent. An attack against North Korea is on the cards. And there is a plan to spend $8 billion on bulking up the U.S. presence in the Asia-Pacific region over the next 5 years by upgrading military infrastructure, conducting additional exercises, and deploying more forces and ships.
Well, that'd be good for the Hawaii economy.
Yeah.
Because they'll put some of that stuff here.
Yeah, but, just this, I cannot tell you how much it annoys me. And to the folks who listen and watch, I have made it very clear that I'm a Christian, and I'm a Christian pacifist activist. And what that means for me is to encourage and exhort my government not to use war as the first means of resolving a geopolitical situation, but to make it the absolute last and go back to hard-won moral negotiations.
Well, again, when you realize the ultimate goal of the wars is, first of all, to rid the world of the ruble and the yuan as a threat to the U.S. dollar. Russia and China aren't just going to surrender their currency.
No.
They have no reason to.
No, definitely
And
not.
then the other idea is, of course, the U.S. government needs this war as a distraction from the coming economic crash and to have somebody to blame. You know, don't point the finger of blame at Wall Street in Washington, D.C.
Oh, no.
It's those evil North Koreans and Iranians and Russians and Chinese. They made us bankrupt the nation, spending all this money on weapons that don't work.
And going back to Korea, there is a Russian-Chinese plan to defuse the Korean crisis. And Russia's foreign minister, a guy that I have tremendous respect for, he's an adult in the room, Sergei Lavrov, said that Russia does not accept a North Korea that possesses nuclear weapons, and cautioned that there is, he was very gentle in the way he stated this, an overwhelming amount of over-the-top belligerent rhetoric on North Korea's nuclear and rocket programs from Washington and Pyongyang. But most importantly, there is a Russian-Chinese plan to defuse and to ratchet down the tensions and the crisis, according to which North Korea would freeze its missile tests, while U.S. and South Korea would stop large-scale exercises.
Well, the U.S. has already, I mean, this has been proposed many times before, and the U.S. is saying, absolutely not. We're exceptional. We have the right to go rattle our sabers in anybody's faces here. And I think this is what has led to this morning's announcement from China that they will attempt to block a U.S. first strike into North Korea. And now we're talking about actual armed conflict between the United States of America and China.
Yeah, and considering that we've got the comms that head out east for our military here, Mike and I are sitting on a first strike target. Yeah.
Eat, drink, and be merry, because tomorrow we may be radioactive vapor.
Yeah. I'd like to also go back to the United States for a moment. Apparently, a Baltimore high school with 0 students proficient in math has the highest graduation rate from the department in Baltimore of, you can't make this stuff up. Baltimore's
But they participated. Of course they have to graduate. They participated.
Oh, you just preempted me on that.
I'm sorry. I
That's
didn't mean
okay.
to do it.
Baltimore's community is stunned after Project Baltimore, an investigative reporting initiative, was launched in March 2017 by Sinclair Broadcast Group, asked this question: how can a high school with 0 students proficient in math have one of the highest graduation rates in Baltimore City? And Project Baltimore is investigating Northwood Appold Community Academy 2, or NACA 2, after students contacted us saying grades are changed so students can graduate. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of.
These are the teachers who are making this report.
Oh, my Lord, have mercy.
Yeah.
And the school is located in East Baltimore City in Maryland, where nearly 1/3 of African American kids have 0 net wealth. Not giving them a quality education, in my world, is one of the lousiest forms of child abuse that could ever be inflicted on them.
Well, it's also a problem because, and we're hearing this from the university level, as educational standards are lowered at the high school level, colleges are having to revise their curriculum down in order so that the incoming students can get a chance at being brought back up.
Yeah.
And as a result, at the end of the four-year university, the quality of the education that goes with that degree and that loan agreement is inferior to that of other countries around the world. And that's one of the reasons why there's this big stink over the H-1B visa employees coming in from other countries. Yes, they're going to accept a lower salary, but more to the point, they are better educated in issues like IT and engineering and science.
They've got a knowledge base, for heaven's sakes. And to my mind, those teachers who changed the grades on these kids, who allowed the kids at the end of the day to learn utterly nothing, but were allowed to graduate, as though graduation were a participation trophy, I think they should be sacked and barred from teaching for the rest of their lives. They have done a tremendous injustice to these kids.
Yes, they have.
Because these kids are going to come out into the world with absolutely no skills, no abilities whatsoever. And what's going to happen to them? They're probably going to get eaten up by the gangs and the drugs. It makes no sense to me.
Well, you know, after all the violence they've seen back there, I guess the school is thinking if we don't graduate these kids, they're going to scream we're being racist and favoring the white students. And we really are at the bread and circuses phase of the United States history.
Yeah. I'd like to go back to Asia. And apparently Guam has issued a preparing for an imminent missile threat guide. And yet, at the end of the day, they say to people, you know, it's just, there are no changes. Everyone should continue to live their lives.
You know, I was commenting on that earlier in the day, and I love this one piece of advice they're giving you.
Yeah.
Do not look at the fireball. Like, we really don't need to be told that.
No.
The problem there, of course, is that the detonation of a nuclear weapon happens so fast.
Yeah.
If you happen to be looking at it, you're not going to be able to close your eyes or turn away from it fast enough.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And if you're looking somewhere else and the thing goes off, you're going to pretty much know not to look at that thing.
Yeah. You were talking about the Chinese government saying that they would attempt to prevent a first strike from the United States against North Korea. So if, in fact, President Trump has decided this war is going forward, would it be correct in saying that his only option, and it may not be a great one, is to do it by a false flag? And as you mentioned earlier...
He has to. The only way he's going to be able to keep China from getting involved is to make it look somehow like North Korea struck the first blow.
Yeah, and...
oh, my goodness, the Koreans are bombing Pearl Harbor.
But, you know, the other thing, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier in the show, the U.S. government's capability for subtlety in creating these events is pretty close to non-existent.
Well, you know, they're pandering to what they think the average American is, and they do tend to underestimate the expertise of ordinary citizens out here. And, of course, that's what started this whole thing all those years ago with the Vince Foster. They put out this photo, and to somebody whose business is imagery and what looks good, it was an obvious fake.
Yeah.
And, again, it's almost like the government is going to say, we're going to feed you a plate of bovine excrement, and if you're a loyal American citizen, you will not notice that it is bovine excrement.
Right.
That doesn't play in Peoria.
I'd like to go back to the issue of China and India, because Chinese official organ has stated that there is a countdown for war with India, and it's begun. And the Chinese Foreign Ministry said that 53 people and an Indian bulldozer was in China's territory and advised India to pull them back. This followed a warning Tuesday when an editorial in the state-run China Daily said that the countdown to a clash between the two forces has begun. And China's saying India needs to withdraw its troops and its equipment, and they have gravely infringed on China's sovereignty, said the Global Times.
Okay, what's India saying about all this?
India is not saying a whole lot, but Bhutan is rejecting Beijing's claim that Doklam belongs to China. The government of Bhutan on Thursday refuted Chinese Foreign Ministry claims about Thimphu, telling Beijing that the trilateral border standoff area in Doklam in the Sikkim sector is not Bhutan's territory.
Oh, boy.
And a top Chinese diplomat, Wang Wenli, had claimed that Bhutan had conveyed to Beijing through diplomatic channels that the area of the standoff is not its territory. And this could get really, really difficult and very quickly. And the reason I say that is because last year the United States upgraded, if you will, its defense ties with India, with a kind of look toward India's difficulties with China.
So if the U.S. attacks North Korea,
Yep.
China intervenes.
Yep.
The U.S. is in a position to create a two-front war against China.
Yes.
And again, the reason for this standoff with India is India is trying to build its own superhighway transport belt, if you will.
One belt, one road.
One belt, one road, going up to Europe for trade with Europe.
Yep.
And this is a direct financial threat to the Chinese one belt, one road, the new Silk Road, going in there. And that's why China has reacted so harshly to India's incursion across that line to complete the road. Because unfortunately it was the Himalayas, and it's not like they have the option of changing the route all that easily. But that's what this, again, it's all about the money.
Yeah. You know, when Karl Marx made that observation that all wars are economic in their origin, I don't think the guy was too terribly far wrong, do you?
No, he was absolutely right.
Yeah.
You know, remember, some we know wrote this article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars?
Yes, I remember.
Yes, I read it.
I know that person.
Oh, you do? If I ever catch you with him, you're in big trouble. We've got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we get back to clearing our talking points, I'm looking at this story on Fox News about up in Chicago, they're getting ready to issue a city ID card, and they will not require any documentation that you are a legal resident. And presumably, with this ID card, you will be allowed to register to vote and participate in the elections. And so, I mean, it's amazing how the U.S. is going out to the rest of the world and acting like this mighty empire, and yet cannot seem to deal with the illegal immigrant refugee problem in our own country. Clearly, that is by design. And remember, I said earlier in the show, Obama and Hillary Clinton, they're already getting ready to hit the campaign trail for next year. So, yes, we need more illegal immigrants voting because, by golly, if we'd only gotten another 2 million illegal immigrants to vote, Hillary would be the president. What's wrong with you people? Anyway, yours.
Okay. This comes to us from antiwar.com, and the article was very thoughtful. Why the Saudi war on Yemen is seen as U.S.-sponsored state terrorism. The U.S.-Saudi war in Yemen is now in its third year, and the indiscriminate Saudi bombing campaign has destroyed much of the country's infrastructure, left thousands dead and millions starving in a man-made famine, and triggered a cholera epidemic that has infected almost 500,000 people. On 23 July, the International Committee of the Red Cross warned that more than 600,000 people were expected to contract cholera in Yemen this year.
It's a great way to clean out the surplus population. Look how they did it down in Haiti.
Oh, Lord,
yes.
that was just terrible. And most Americans are not really awake, shall we say, to their country's role in this war on the Middle East's poorest country. But the Yemenis know very well that Washington supplies the bombs and sponsors the Saudi bombing campaign, responsible for their suffering. In the capital, Sana'a, anti-American graffiti is plastered all over the wall throughout the city, screaming, U.S. kills Yemeni people. And they see the war as not just a Saudi war, but a U.S. war on their country.
The Saudis are just the errand boys.
Yeah. In Yemen, in its enabling the Saudis, the unhinged, surveilled states of America is colluding in Saudi war crimes and state-sponsored terrorism against the Yemeni people. And, they're assassinating and maiming non-combatants for life. I'm talking about little children getting gunned down in the streets, okay?
Yes.
Because the Saudis, aided by the U.S. military, have closed the ports, no food can get in, so now children are dying by the tens of hundreds from complications of malnutrition. And then, of course, there is the cholera epidemic, potentially brought on by a weaponized form of the disease. And unfortunately, right now, you think kids, they're the future of the world. So all children should be treated with love and respect, structure, and allowing them to achieve and get their full potential.
Oh, no, you don't understand the rules. I mean, our children are good.
Yeah.
The other guy's children, they're bad. They're all potential terrorists.
Well, Haven't we kind of made them that way, Michael?
Yeah, actually,
okay.
You watch your friends and family blown to bloody bits, and the shrapnel says made in the USA. You're not going to be entirely cheerful about that.
No. And
I wouldn't be. Would you? No.
No. And Yemeni children right now are trapped in the worst humanitarian disaster in modern history in Yemen. And I have to tell you, Mike, I am absolutely ashamed of my country's war crimes here. I wish you and I could immigrate to a country which is civilized and doesn't indulge in this kind of behavior, but unfortunately you and I are a little too old and much too broke to do so at this point.
Yeah, plus name a country that isn't getting caught up in all this World War nonsense. That's the real problem.
Andorra. And maybe Monaco.
Sealand.
Yes.
Okay.
Now let's go back to Afghanistan, and apparently John McCain wants to force a Senate debate on Afghanistan war strategy and, of course, calls for more troops and staying longer.
Here's your rifle, John.
Yeah. Worried by the Trump administration's delay in announcing a military strategy for the war in Afghanistan, John McCain said Thursday he'll try to force a debate on Capitol Hill, offering his own plan that would force a troop increase.
We got to take a break here.
Okay.
We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And, of course, we're talking about John McCain is out there doing rah-rah, we're going to do Afghanistan. Now, remember, about a week ago, they were saying maybe we should just quit and get out of there. Mm-hmm. The U.S. has been in Afghanistan for 16 years.
Yep.
And I said, no way it's going to happen because of the oil pipeline right-of-way, but more importantly, all that opium that is just needed by the American drug lords, such as the Central Intelligence Agency, or is that the Cocaine Importation Agency? It's one of those things.
One of those, yeah.
And I said the embarrassment is going to be to try to explain to President Trump that we're staying in a war in Afghanistan, which has destroyed so many empires throughout history, to protect America's drug traffic. And then, miracle of miracles, ISIS shows up. Oh, ISIS is now in Afghanistan. We have to stay in. So McCain is now out there saying, absolutely, we need to go on in and get tough with Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And the Russians are laughing their heads off that we're walking into this trap.
Yeah. McCain also said that the U.S. should secure a long-term agreement with Afghanistan for an enduring military presence there and should begin to impose penalties on neighboring Pakistan as punishment for that country's harboring of insurgents and terrorists. And apparently this comes at a time when the Trump White House is divided over debate about what to do. And I have a very polite suggestion to Senator McCain, which is that doing the same thing over and over in precisely the same way, yet expecting a different outcome, is a classic definition of insanity.
Well, see, the issue here isn't the outcome.
Yeah.
The issue is maintaining that flow
Presence,
of oil and opium to the United States. And after the oil and opium runs out, as far as the U.S. is concerned, they could walk away and say, all right, we lost that one, but we got all that we wanted to get out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have to wonder with Senator McCain, who never saw a U.S.-instigated war he didn't just absolutely love, there are some questions that come to mind in terms of his great enthusiasm for pursuing countless wars, many times at horrendous costs in blood and money. Now, senators in 2017 make $174,000 per year. Yet, McCain's net worth is estimated at plus minus $21 million. Now, I've got to wonder, Michael, from what industries the extreme gap was filled between his annual salary and his net worth. And I don't think I'd be too far off the mark to say that the difference is probably made up either by personal investments in America's military-industrial complex or covert contributions from these industries.
Or investment in the pharmaceutical industry, because even the legal pharmaceutical industry is just drowning in opium.
Yeah.
And they're literally out there telling doctors, go ahead, prescribe these pills. We don't care what happens. Let him get hooked. It's a guaranteed source of revenue.
Yeah. And there was another very thoughtful article, again, in antiwar.com. Yes, Congress, Afghanistan is your Vietnam. And it goes on to state, to characterize congressional Congress regarding the Vietnam War as timorous and irresponsible is to be kind. There were individual exceptions, of course, among them Senator Morse, who had opposed the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, and Senator Fulbright, who by 1967 openly regretted his vote in favor and recognized Vietnam for the disaster it had become. Collectively, however, these legislators failed objectively. Well, with the passage of half a century here, we are back in the soup, or more accurately, back in the sand, with the United States currently mired in the longest armed conflict in the nation's history, considerably longer than Vietnam. Senator Lausch's proposal of 1967 just might merit a fresh look. What I believe, Mike, President Trump and NATO should do is to remove the troops as quickly as is safely possible from Afghanistan, then negotiate with whatever government is left standing in Kabul for the oil pipelines and mineral rights. Of course, that would be logical.
But again, that cuts off the flow of the opium.
Yeah.
And the other, I agree that Afghanistan has become a quagmire, but then almost all of these have become quagmires. I would argue that going into North Korea, that's going to be the new Vietnam.
Yes.
Because we didn't win in Vietnam. We didn't win in Korea.
Nope.
Again, if we get into a ground war in North Korea, even the Pentagon is saying it's going to be hundreds of thousands of dead Americans, and who knows how many on the other side. During the first part of the Korean War, the U.S. basically carpet bombed North Korea and murdered somewhere between 1/3 and 1/2 of their entire civilian population, which is, by the way, the reason Kim Jong-un and his people are willing to build nuclear-tipped missiles to sort of discourage us from doing that again.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, and by the way, one more comment about that.
Okay.
The fact that Trump is talking about going on in and attacking North Korea tells us that he knows North Korea does not, in fact, have nuclear warheads that can go on those ballistic missiles.
Right, because if he did, he wouldn't be making those statements.
No, he wouldn't. He'd be backing off and saying, it's time to engage.
Yeah.
You know.
Another interesting development that happened last Wednesday. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, lost 2 of her top aides last Wednesday. Haley's Chief of Staff, Steve Groves, resigned, and so did her Communications Director, Jonathan Wachtel. Haley said on Twitter Wednesday that it was because of family concerns, which is the usual excuse.
It means that we're fired.
Yeah. The departures also come ahead of Haley's trip to Vienna to review Iran's nuclear activities with the UN's International Atomic Energy Agency.
In other words, she's going to Vienna to lay the political groundwork for Trump to say, Iran is not in compliance with the P5+1, let's invade.
Yeah, it's pretty grim. And as we look further in Asia, apparently there are clashes around Marawi in Philippines, and there is a continued siege. A new round of fighting has erupted around the southern Philippine city of Marawi, as ongoing attempts to recapture the city from the ISIS rebels have led to what is basically an open-ended siege.
There's ISIS again, always showing up in nations the U.S. wants to invade.
Oh, yeah, And apparently it's not as heavily as it's been before. And my observation on this is timing when it comes to geopolitical issues and wars, including alleged drug wars, which is what Duterte says he's doing, are never accidental. And one thing I find very interesting, ISIS didn't rear its ugly head in the Philippines until Duterte vowed to execute all drug sellers.
I mean, look how fast this situation deteriorated. The U.S. and the Philippines, good friends, we share military bases, all that stuff over there. And then all of a sudden Duterte says, we have got a really big, out-of-control drug problem here. We're just going to hunt these guys down and kill them. And Obama gets on the phone to Duterte, even though it's really none of his business, and says, no, don't you start killing those drug dealers. Those drug dealers are precious. Don't you dare do it. And Duterte said, look, it is our country, and I'm going to do what I think is best. And all of a sudden, the Philippines are on the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list. And from there, it's a short step to, oh, my goodness, look, there's ISIS. We have to go in and bomb.
Yeah. I'd like to go back to this issue of Trump stating forever that Iran is not in compliance with the nuclear deals. And last month, he was very unhappy to have to declare that they were in compliance via the IAEA. And even though literally nothing has happened between now and now with respect to the deal, President Trump declared yesterday Iran is not in compliance. in the course of his vacation at a golf course in New Jersey. Now, he didn't offer any details on what he's threatening or what he's demanding, although he did condemn President Obama for making the deal in the first place, reiterating how opposed he is to the deal. And, Mr. President, I have a word for you. You, sir, seem to have learned everything you know about Iran from those, and you know who the usual suspects, who want to see it neutralized as an existential threat to Israel, but basically only with American blood and American money.
Okay, first of all, I need to step on. Iran is not an existential threat to Israel. It's the other way around.
Yeah.
Israel's an existential threat to everybody in the region.
Yeah.
What Israel is concerned about is that Iran has tremendous political and economic influence over that region.
Yeah.
And Israel wants Iran smashed up and paralyzed, as happened to Iraq.
Yes.
So that Israel continues to maintain a monopoly on a lot of different areas of activity in the Middle East. But that's what's going on. Iran is not a threat to Israel. Iran has not initiated a war of conquest against another country in over 200 years.
No.
And look at Israel. They can't go 6 months without bombing and killing somebody.
Yeah. And so I would say to President Trump that his hatred and suspicion of the current government appears to be very ill-founded and very illogical. Yes, it's a limited Islamic democracy, but you've got to give the post-1979 Iranians some credit here. They have a constitution which does respect the rights of minority religions in that country, such as Christianity, Judaism, and the Baha'i faith. Now, to date, to the best of my understanding, Israel doesn't have a constitution whatsoever.
And they are intolerant of all other religions.
Yeah.
In fact, they're out there now trying to say, it's time to just say, we're a Jewish state, a theocracy, and a very intolerant one here. But you remember several years ago, Israel tried to offer financial inducements to Jews living in Iran to emigrate to Israel. And the Jews
to make Aliyah. Yes.
And the Jews in Iran said, no, we're comfortable here. We've got nice homes. We've got a lot of friends. Nobody bothers us. In fact, one of the world's oldest continually operating synagogues is in Iran.
Yes.
And it was rather amazing that all the propaganda was out there, Ahmadinejad is a new Hitler, he's going to do a Holocaust. And yet the Jews living within Iran itself, they were perfectly happy there. Nobody was harassing them. Nobody was loading them on cattle cars. Nobody, and basically they told the government of Israel to just mind their own business. They didn't want to leave.
Right. And if President Trump would like to get just a little tiny bit of reality about what life is like in Iran, I would very strongly suggest that he watch the following video shot by a charming Jewish videographer about the state of Iranian Jews. And I have 3 words for the president and anyone monitoring the show on his behalf. They are thriving. The name of the video is Don't Tell Mother I'm in Iran.
It's a great little video.
All of you who have not watched it, I encourage you, please, it's online. You can see it. It's in English. And this young man is taken to a beautiful synagogue and also to the Majlis, which is the Iranian parliament. And there is a chair for a Jewish member, And so it's not what we've been told.
It never is.
Yeah.
You know, everything we think we know about the rest of the world, whether it's Iran or North Korea, is been told to us by the same people, institutions, networks that told us Saddam had nuclear weapons, that humans were warming the earth, there were torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin,
yada, yada.
Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, blah, 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 blah. How many more times do you have to be lied to before you accept? You are being lied to every moment of your life by the government and the corporate media.
Right. Now, let's bop on over to Libya. And there's been a new development. Apparently, Israel's Mossad has replaced the CIA as the handler of Libyan strongman Khalifa Haftar. A recent revelation, albeit quietly by choice, has been trickling under the popular Western-dominated news radar. This underreported, to the point of outright censored expose, has to do with Israel secretly providing weapons and military assistance to Khalifa Haftar, commander of the Libyan National Army, otherwise known by the acronym LNA, one of the factions in the so-called Libyan civil war.
Imagine my shock.
Yeah. And despite recent reports establishing Israel as a supplier of war material, and air power support to LNA Haftar, there hasn't been a peep from either the UN or the Western media outlets. And here are a few excerpts from this highly significant revelation. He's the guy who controls the eastern part of Libya, and he has reportedly been receiving Israeli military aid following meetings with Israeli intelligence that were allegedly mediated by the UAE. Well, I think that Israel has its eyes on the prize, Mike, of access and development of Libya's oil, which I would say would probably be the quid pro quo here for these Israeli weapons to be flowing to Haftar's people. What do you think?
I think that's a very likely possibility, and of course this is going to be very upsetting to the United States because the reason they did the regime change originally was to get Libya's oil to be sold only for the U.S. dollar, to get rid of the gold dinar, to reimpose a private central bank on them. And now all of a sudden Israel's going to get access to that oil, and Israel will sell it for whatever they feel like selling it for, not necessarily for shekels, whatever. And so basically the U.S. has gone on in and done all the blood work, and Israel is basically running an end play to get around them. Okay, let's see. We're going to take a phone call here from Paul in Oceanside, California. Paul, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I just had a thought on Trump's rhetoric on North Korea. Could it be, since Congress seems to act in unison only when they are against Trump, that maybe by making all of this strong talk against Korea, that Trump is betting that the Congress is going to vote against him, just like they did against the Russian sanctions?
It sounds like a good theory. I don't think the war hawks in Congress are going to go for it.
Well, maybe it's something he's trying. Who knows?
Well, you know,
anyway, I thought it just thought.
Well, it's an interesting idea, but don't forget, under the War Powers Act, Trump does have the authority to launch an attack against North Korea. Then he has, I think it's 30 days, to make the case before Congress for a formal declaration of war. The problem is, over the last several presidential administrations, Congress has sort of abandoned its oversight regarding wars, and now would be a very, very poor time for Congress to stand up all of a sudden and say, well, look, we're supposed to be the ones who are declaring war, because people have been criticizing Congress about that for a very, very long time, and the attitude is, well, the president knows best, and for them to like do a 180 right now, I don't think that that's going to fly right now, especially with next year being midterms.
Well, look what happened when he made this rhetoric the other day. The first thing the Democrats did is they came out, we ought to go along with Korea. We ought to go along with North Korea. We should give them what they want. All of a sudden they're in unison that we ought to go along with North Korea. When before, all they wanted to do was say, oh, we should bomb the hell out of them.
Yeah, well,
anyway,
you're right, but there's a difference between the rhetoric and what Congress will actually do, and I think the recent debacle over Obamacare is a good example of that. All right, Paul, we're going to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America.
I'm so sorry.
Give me a heads up next time I'll pull you down. We probably just deafened our control room.
I am so sorry.
Okay. Now that you're all awake, Fox News is now reporting Donald Trump came on out and made a statement that they're not ruling out military action in Venezuela, which means apparently the covert attempt at regime change is not going very well.
Nope.
So to heck with it, let's just go on in and invade the place. And again, 2 weeks ago, head of the CIA, yes, this is a U.S. regime change operation going on there. And maybe the reason they're ramping up on Venezuela is they're aware Israel is getting ready to steal Libya's oil out from under the U.S. invasion.
Yep.
And they're going to make up the shortfall with the Venezuelan oil.
If Russia doesn't get to it first, because Russia's been very interested in that oil as well.
So has China.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the reason why the destabilization operation is there, is Venezuela and China have been very cozy, and Venezuela sells a lot of oil to China for the yuan.
Yes.
And that is what grieves us the most.
Right.
All right, you got a story here.
Yeah, apparently a judge has ordered a new search of State Department servers for Hillary's Benghazi email. And ironically, State Department officials at the time decided to search records voluntarily turned over by Hillary and some of her former aides from private servers, as well as records collected by the FBI during the investigations, but figured it wasn't necessary to search the one place where all official communications on such a topic should have been housed from the beginning.
We don't need to look over there.
State Department servers.
Those aren't the email servers you're looking at.
Yes, for whatever reason, haha, nudge nudge, wink wink, State has continually refused to conduct the search of its taxpayer-funded, going on 2.5 years now. Luckily, some small bit of rational thought prevailed yesterday when a U.S. district judge filed an order demanding a search of State Department records for any and all Benghazi-related emails to be completed by 22 September 2017.
And the State Department has already come on back and said, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Those emails were stored on Lois Lerner's hard drive anyway, so we don't really have them anymore.
I mean, just the absolute impunity with which these people are allowed to walk, Michael, is incredible.
It is infuriating.
Yeah, you know.
I mean, they're sending kids to these prison factory complexes for a marijuana cigarette, and you have Hillary Clinton quite possibly committed treason.
Yep.
And she's being protected.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's ridiculous. Well, how do we want to wrap up the show today?
Well, obviously, this is a very scary time for the world, and we are feeling it here in Hawaii.
Oh, yeah.
This is no longer something that's abstract and distant on the other side of the world. We're looking at the real possibility of seeing armed conflict with our own eyes in the streets of our cities, in the skies overhead.
Yeah.
And it really is starting to feel like a world war. All right, there's the music. Everybody try and relax this weekend. We certainly are. We're burned out. We're going to be taking it easy this weekend. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller's program, and we will be back on Monday here on Republic Broadcasting Network. So have a good weekend. Have a safe weekend. Aloha, America.